So let's get stuck in and see how things shake out between our two MPL competitors. It is great to be underway with MPL Magic here on a Sunday. Thanks for joining us as part of this coverage of League Weekend. And here he is, the man, the myth, the legend, Andrea Mengucci, playing a deck that he has become known for piloting here. Esper 1, or Esperoni as he insists upon calling it. And a mulligan to kick things off. The Italian looks like Rei Sato happy with his opener. A land-heavy hand with triumphs. You've got the Edgewall Innkeeper. There's ways to find more cards here.
Yeah, Ray, I don't think you can afford to mulligan this hand in his position. You have Innkeeper and Lovestruck Beast, but the hand is certainly not perfect. And for Andrea, being on the play is massive here, as it does mean that he guaranteed has access to that Elspeth's Nightmare before Ray gets to the point where he can actually cast an adventure creature and capitalize on Edgewall Innkeeper. So if Ray was to play this Innkeeper this turn in preparation for a turn 3 Lovestruck Beast, Andrea has that Elspeth Nightmare as an answer.
I'm really impressed by the way that Mengucci has come clearly expecting a lot of white, a lot of red, a lot of aggro in particular, with cards like the Eliminate, cards like the Heartless Act. But Elspeth's Nightmare in this deck it's a real overperformer. It really is, Marnie. Because it attacks on 3 different angles at the same time. It goes after the board, it goes after the hand, it goes after the graveyard. You will probably get some value out of Elspeth's Nightmare. It's slow, sure, 3 mana, sorcery speed, can take a while to actually kick into top gear. But the fact of the matter is, there's very few matchups in which it's a dead card. I think it's a very judicious choice here, and we're seeing it do work. This is not only going to get rid of that 1/1 and weaken Sato's board position. It's also going to pluck the Great Henge from your opponent's hand. And even if that's not a straight up 2-for-1, that's still a great way to advance your game plan here.
It's Andrea setting the pace of the game at more his speed and allowing him to go through these transition turns that will eventually let him do some of the Yorion tricks that this deck is really trying to do. And unfortunately for Andrea, no untapped green source this turn, so we may just see Treacherous Blessing plus a Triome. But with that Binding the Old Gods in hand, Ray's hand isn't looking great right now. Yes, he has access to Innkeeper Lovestruck Beast next turn, which could allow some pressure. But if Andrea finds an Extinction event off this Treacherous Blessing, suddenly Ray is doing nothing and Andrea is fully stocked for the upcoming turns.
The only thing that really to worry about here for Mengucci is the Kazandu Mammoth plus the double Fabled Passage in hand for Sato, which are known. I mean, that represents a lot of damage, right? The Mammoth having a landfall ability. But I think for that reason, again, the Binding the Old Gods is going to keep the pressure down. And there you go. Something like Doom Foretold, a way to winnow away your opponent's creatures. Wow, another Fabled Passage here. This map is going to get in for a stack, but it's not going to be a consistent or reliable source of damage here for Sato, who is probably going to lose it next turn to Binding the Old Gods.
Yeah, but it's a good point that 7 damage here. Ray is going to put 6 more power on the board. Andrea is going to go down to 12. So another land for Ray. But now Andrea needs to spend his turn using Binding the Old Gods because he didn't find an Extinction event. And if that ends up being the case and Ray draws something like a Goldspan Dragon, this game could just end before Andrea is able to stabilize.
I suppose that's true, yeah, especially as the Treacherous Blessing's also going to ding Andrea for a point every time he plays a card. Given enough time, Mengu wins this 100%, but there is enough pressure on the board to, 6 damage coming across again. There's the threat of a dragon off the top of the library as well here.
Yeah, I think Andrea does need to use Binding the Old Gods this turn to get rid of that Mammoth, as unfortunate as it may be. He knows about the second copy of Fabled Passage in Ray's hands, so he can't reasonably allow the Mammoth to live. It looks like he's actually going for Yorion instead, perhaps deeming that he needs to find an Extinction event, so he needs to draw an extra 4 cards here as well as getting 2 scries.
Yeah, right. Okay. Blinking the Omen of the Sea and the Treacherous Blessing. Now, Treacherous Blessing says that you have to sacrifice it if it becomes the target of a spell, but Yorion doesn't target it. Yorion just can exile stuff without actually targeting it. So for that reason, the Treacherous Blessing does act as a recursive draw 3 in this deck. Very powerful, but also a little awkward when you don't find the business you need.
Yeah, I'm just curious about this line from Andrea. Perhaps it looks like he Oh, okay. This is really cool from Andrea. So by essentially overdrawing here, which he knew he was going to do with Treacherous Blessing and Omen of the Sea, he actually gets to set up a Dance of the Man's turn for the next turn. He's going to be able to discard selective enchantments, which would give him the ability to bring everything back and have a more explosive game plan than he otherwise would using Dance of the Mans, which is why we see him immediately discarding that Doom Foretold and thinking about, do I want my other enchantment to be Binding the Old Gods or Omen of the Sun, opting for Omen of the Sun to get a bit more life and blockers. This is a really cool line from Andrea that I didn't see initially.
Yeah, overdrawing, which is not, usually what you want to do. Discarding to hand size never feels that great, except when you're setting up a sweet reanimation turn. A chump block with the Orion on the Kazandu Mammoth means that Fabled Passage remains uncracked. Good news for Rei, who can play a second Fabled Passage here.
Rei's already played the land for the turn. Could leave up cycling a Ketria Triumph or just put Obosh in hand. This is really Rei thinking about, do I need more than Obosh? Should I be cycling right now to try to find something like an Alrund's Epiphany so I can foretell it and be able to cast it next turn?
Right. Yeah. I was thinking there's not too much in this deck that you actually want to cast at sorcery speed for 2 mana because, there's Stomp, there's Petty Theft. But no, that's a great point. The Alrund's Epiphany is a good reason to cycle the Triumph now because then you can, of course, foretell it straight away. Apart from that, not too many sorcery speed 2 mana players in this deck.
You see Rei head in hands just running through all the permutations of what do I need to do to capitalize on this, because there has to be some sort of reason Andrea set up the game the way he did and discarded a card like Omen of the Sun that looks amazing here. I wouldn't be surprised if Rei had Andrea on exactly Dance of the Mats, which is why he actually didn't go for the Obosh this turn, feeling like he needs more.
Cycles by the Triumph finds another land. Unfortunate draws here for Rei, but now we're going to see the chickens come home to roost here for the Italian. He set up this Dance of the Man's turn. Let's see how it pans out for him. Dance for 4. He's only got 2 to bring back, however.
3. There's the Elspeth Nightmare from earlier.
There is the Nightmare, of course.
As well.
Yeah. No, forgive me. I forgot about that one.
This is stabilization.
Buffering the lifestyle a little bit with the Omen. Go ahead, Manny. Sorry.
Sorry, I was just going to say that Andrea now gets rid of the Innkeeper. Doom Foretold will take down one of the threats, likely the Lovestruck Beast, because it can't currently attack. And now with these 2 1/1s, the Kazandu Mammoth is neutralized. Goldspan Dragon off the top would put Andrea down to 2, but thanks to that Omen of the Sun, he's still alive. And now he gets to get rid of his Treacherous Blessing with the Doom Foretold in play. Andrea is stable.
Yeah, he's looking very good. There's another Doom Foretold in hand, not to mention that Archon, both of which can buffer the life total pretty significantly. Binding the Old Gods can make sure the Doom Foretold procs if he so chooses. Sometimes, however, Doom Foretold players, they want people to feed the Doom Foretold for as long as possible. So it's not by no means guaranteed that Mengu will have his Doom Foretold proc here. See what the players from Sato, who's drawn another land, man.
And the worst part for Rei about this Elspeth Nightmare in play is it is going to give Andrea full information come that next draw step about what Rei's hand is. Normally, having 5 cards in hand at least allows you the potential of bluffing that you have some threats. Rei can say, okay, well, I have all these cards, but maybe some of them are Alrund's Epiphanies, and that's why I haven't cast them yet, right?
Oh, my goodness.
Now there's just nothing that Rei can do, no posturing for position, and Andrea is going to know that he can go full steam ahead with another Doom Foretold or with Archon of Sun's Grace, and Rei will be able to do nothing about it. And I think this game is actually just going to be over very quickly.
Yeah, it looks like it. Rei has been so unfortunate just drawing about 6 lands off the top here in a row, not finding any business whatsoever. But hey, that's just how it breaks down sometimes. Here's Kazandu Mammoth coming across. We're going to see a chump block, of course. And Obosh in my hand, I guess, says Rei.
Shields are down.
Yep. It seems like it. There's obviously no point in bluffing there because of this duress effect. I mean, the upside here for Rei, the upside is that you don't get to take anything with the Elspeth's Nightmare. You take them. You take the edges where you can get them.
Andrea is shaking his head. He knows that was this was all he needed to see. With that Jawari disruption in hand, there's not even the potential of top decked Alrund's Epiphanies being chained because he's able to force spike the first one. I think Andrea can honestly just play Archon here, knowing that there's nothing Rei can do to punish him for it, and then that would allow him to go full steam ahead the next turn.
Yeah, the Archon's going to be important in buffering the life total as well. Alternatively, if you wanted to cycle away that Doom Foretold, you could do that as well. Looks like Ming is actually going to play out the Treacherous Blessing here in order to gain a 2/2 Pegasus, as well as drawing 3 extra cards and an attack for 1. Why not? So the risky draw... Never mind.
The risky draw was Epiphany.
Yep.
The real draw, as the game had been established by Rei, is just going to be another land.
Just another land. Just land number 10,000 there. Poor old Rei going out with a whimper rather than a bang. Not how you want to do it. But we move to the sideboards now. And Money, before we actually get to see how the players sideboarded, let's have a chat about what might have gone through their heads as they approached this break between games 1 and 2.
Rei is definitely bringing in Mystical Disputes. Unfortunately, other than that, not that much counter spells in Rei's sideboard. The 2 copies of Clothis, God of Destiny, will certainly be good. They'll help keep graveyards in check for something like Dance of the Mans, and Andrea doesn't have that many great answers to Clothis. There's no things like Elspeth Conquers Death running around in this list of 4-color Doom Foretold. That's kind of a card that we've seen fall by the wayside now that Binding of the Old Gods has joined the list, because in most cases it's a similar effect for 4 mana that does more of what you want to do on the second chapter of the saga. So certainly Clothis much better now against the 4-color Doom Foretold deck than it was in the past, though Doom Foretold still a problem and can get rid of it. I think we're going to see some copies of the Ox of Agonis come in, maybe not the full 3, but likely 1 to 2 from Rei, just to allow him to essentially mitigate games like that where he draws a million lands and nothing he can do about it, have more outs towards that. I think from Andrea, we're going to see some more instant speed interaction come in. Those Mystical Disputes are great. The Disdainful Strokes are excellent. They answer all of the problem cards like Goldspan Dragon and Alrund's Epiphany from Rei. But while the matchup gets a little better for Rei, I don't think it gets that much better, and Andrea should still be feeling quite confident.
Well, here we can see the sideboarding choices that were made. 2 copies of Dance of the Mans come out, 4 copies of Elspeth's Nightmare, and Shaving a Treacherous Blessing. For a whole bunch of interaction, as you said, Mystical Dispute, Disdainful Stroke, Cling to Dust, interestingly, Eliminate, and another Glass Casket brought in. On the other side, there's the Clothis, there's the Mystical Dispute, the Ox as well, and the Soulseer. And all 3 copies of the Ox came in favor of Goldspan Dragon, a Kona. All 3 copies of Alrund's Epiphany, I think that's very wise. Yep, the Hazard doesn't do much. 2 copies of the Great Henge and a Forest. So Rei really looking to make his deck a lot leaner and a lot meaner. He's looking to lower that curve because he knows that Alrund's Epiphany pretty bad when your opponent's got Dispute, Stroke, and so on.
Yeah, you do not really want to be playing Alrund's Epiphany into a Mystical Dispute deck. Having your 7 or 6 mana card answered by 1 mana is usually just going to be game-ending amounts of negative tempo. I think something that we saw from Andrea was the Cling to Dust coming in purely as a nod to Ox of Agonis and how annoying that card can be for these mid-range decks. He read that Rei would be bringing them in. Rei actually decided to bring in all 3 because of how good they have the potential to be. So I think that's a great read from Andrea to bring in the Cling to Dust. And on Rei's side, the Soulseer coming in, almost purely a nod to Archon of Sun's Grace. Yes, it does kill Yorion, but Yorion, not that big of an issue. Most of your creatures are bigger than it when it comes to attacking. The big problem is Archon going wide. This deck doesn't deal well with a wide board.
It's a great point. Like, you can just treat the Archon of Sun's Grace like an enchantment. It doesn't attack, it doesn't block, it just sits there and poops out 2/2s, and Temur doesn't have a lot to do. It doesn't have any real way to beat that long term. So the Soulseer, good against Yorion, sure, but as you say, mainly there to make sure the Archons don't get too out of control.
Yeah, and I think Rei boarding out a Great Henge was a good heads-up play. Great Henge is a card that is quite powerful because it's an artifact. So once it lands on the battlefield, typically it has been decently to moderately difficult to answer and remove. And something that we see from Andrea's deck with the full 4 copies of Binding the Old Gods is he doesn't really care what your card type is as long as it's not land. So Great Henge, maybe it'll come down and draw a card. More often than not, it's gone after that. And that's just not a card that Rei can afford to have in this matchup where if your board is kept clear, you're not even going to be able to cast it. It's just too risky.
Heading into this match, I talked about the fact that Binding the Old Gods is one of the hardest working cards in Standard at the moment. I stand by that statement. I really do think it is. But it's funny that it is not busted in half. It doesn't ever make these huge swingy plays like an ECD might bring back a Planeswalker or shutting off their spells, whatever. But the fact that it just every single time it's played, basically, it gets value. It kills something, gets a land, and then you forget about the third chapter because it's hardly ever relevant. But the card has meant that stuff like the Great Henge and other non-creature permanents are just less reliable as lasting threats.
Yeah, I think that's a big reason why we saw when Sultai was so popular, and Sultai was also playing 4 copies of Binding the Old Gods, why things kind of shifted in the way they did with these aggressive decks, where suddenly the value of threats that are binding proof went up. In this case specifically, Faceless Haven.
Faceless Haven.
The stocks for Faceless Haven just went through the roof because now you have a land that these decks aren't really well equipped to deal with. Yes, they have some copies of Heartless Actor Eliminate. Andrea's list obviously recognizing the relevance of Faceless Haven and going up to 7 copies of 2 mana instant speed removal to answer them. But the decks that were ill prepared, like Sultai, they started getting preyed on by these snow aggressive decks that just they didn't have answers to Faceless Haven.
I mean, I say the third chapter is irrelevant. Sometimes, oh, money. Sometimes you get them so good.
Even just allowing you to have lifelink Death Touch Pegasus for a turn, get in for some amount of damage through flying blockers, that can be the swing you need for the game.
The best the best time, the best chapter 3s of the Binding the Old Gods is when your opponent forgets about it. You cast, you've got a Binding the Old Gods, you cast Oron's Epiphany, you get the 2 birds, you attack into their Yorio, and they're like, block? You're like, yeah, sure, trade, sucker. Gotcha. You forgot about the third chapter, didn't you? Gotcha. I try to get the moral victory wherever I can, seeing as actual victories are so hard to come by from my perspective. Here's the 1-1 getting in once again. After this Binding the Old Gods comes down, it's going to do some work for Mengu here.
I really love how Mengu has played this game. I think there's been great recognition at every point about what Rei has essentially been representing. Rei on turn 4 opted not to play his Lovestruck Beast, instead just passing the turn with 4 mana up. And Andrea, in response, could have cast a Binding the Old Gods, really tempting on turn 4 to get rid of a Cassandra Mammoth, but recognizing there's a reason Rei is giving up the opportunity to put on further pressure and instead just passing the turn, plays around that mystical dispute by passing back with a Eliminate and Omen of the Sea up instead. And that means that now 2 turns in a row, Andrea is going to be able to resolve a Binding the Old Gods while Rei has a counterspell in hand that he's not able to use because this removal spell is an enchantment that isn't blue.
Mengu's doing a great job here of setting the pace, setting the terms of this game, right? What he's doing is he is not allowing Rei to take charge, take control, enact a game plan. Mengu has put on a clinic here, really, of setting not only the pace of play, but the texture of the game in terms of controlling the way that Rei has and has not been able to leverage his cards. This mystical dispute has been blanked. Mengu's played around stuff really effectively, but still is doing a great job of managing the board and making sure he gets the most out of his cards while Rei gets the least out of his.
Yeah, and you see Mengu thinking about using the Heartless Act on the Edgewall Innkeeper in combat there to potentially prevent Rei from being able to play an adventure creature post-combat to draw a card. But the read for Mengu is if Rei had an adventure creature, he would probably not give Andrea that window. He would play the adventure creature before attacking to make sure that he gets that card before the Innkeeper attacks in. So with that, Andrea takes the damage, and that allows him to use the Heartless Act on a more substantial threat like the Kazandu Mammoth, with the read that Rei probably doesn't have an adventure creature in hand right now.
I'm going to see Yorion put in hand here. Can't play it this turn, however. Does have the Bind in the Old Gods. Is that going to go after the Innkeeper?
It could. I think Andrea needs to think about, do I think I can overload the interaction spell that Rei is representing? Obviously, up to this point, it's been Mystical Dispute. That's been the read, considering Andrea saw Rei manually tap his mana last turn to leave up the single blue source before playing another land for 2 mana total. So it definitely seems like, from Andrea's point of view, Rei is holding a Mystical Dispute, maybe another counterspell.
But now Meg is at a point where you can actually play even around this Mystical Dispute. This Yorion beats it, and there's no second blue, so you're not having to worry about it. You're not having to worry about a second counterspell.
Yeah, I believe Andrea can actually just fire off Yorion or Dance of the Mans here with Mystical Dispute up, with full confidence that it's going to resolve.
And this is a tidy Yorion here as well. Draw 2, scry 4, gain 2, and get a couple of soldiers. And Megu really just doesn't look to be in any trouble here. Remember, Rei's not playing Embercleave. These 1/1s will block effectively.
Yeah, I really hate calling games this early, but I do not see a route to victory with the resolution of this Yorion for Rei. It's going to be...
You should do it, though, because it's all upside for me. Either you're right and you look smart, and working with smart people makes me seem smart too, right? Or you're wrong, and I get to tease you about it. So money here, 100% confirmed, unlosable for Andrea Mengucci. That's Money Davuti's words here. That's what he's saying. So if he's right, what a genius. If he's wrong, wow, what a turkey. Let's see.
Riley, I just need to start today off with a win, okay?
Yeah, we need to get you need a win.
I got my first prediction win in the second match of round 6 yesterday. Something needs to go right today.
Well, let's see if we can bring that about for you here, Money. Away goes the Yorion, but it's already drawn 2 cards. The damage already done to a certain extent. I mean, this Mystical Dispute can also save the Yorion. Do you care about it, though? I don't think so.
I don't think you care about it. I think you can just let it go. I think Andrea should more be considering whether he just wants to eliminate the Mammoth or the Innkeeper right now. I think the Mammoth eliminate here is fantastic from Andrea. This Yorion does not matter in the slightest. You have the board gummed up. You have the game-ending spells in your hand. You have both Emeria's Call and Dance of the Dead that will eventually take care of things. Could even just kill the Innkeeper, recognizing I can chump this Mammoth until I kill it. I just need Rei not to draw extra cards.
Ooh, Goldspan Dragon, though.
Goldspan Dragon is good. However... even with the treasure that it makes and leaving up Mystical Dispute, Andrea is going to be able to go Dance of the Mans for 6, get back 2 Binding of the Old Gods next turn, and have mana to Mystical Dispute back, and Rei will not have 3 to pay.
So while this Goldspan Dragon is going to get in for a little bit, it's going to be a very brief appearance here as we see Mengu on the double block. Well, it's not a double block, sorry, blocking 2 creatures, excuse me.
I think as long as Andrea doesn't believe that Rei has exactly double counterspell in hand here, he can just cast Dance of the Mans for 6 and essentially win the game on the spot.
Ooh, Doom Foretold also here.
That could be safer. You could go for Doom Foretold plus Binding of the Old Gods and still have Mystical Dispute up. It's certainly a less all-in play because neither of these spells are blue. So even if Rei has exactly double counterspell in hand, one of them will need to be Mystical Dispute, and he won't be able to cast it.
So this definitely resolves. Nothing that Rei can do about this.
Yeah. Now Andrea's going to play Binding.
Now this could get countered.
Rei's going to try to counter it, and Andrea's going to give him the good news of, had the dispute the whole time, you never had a chance. Beats.
So there's the Mystical Dispute in response to the other Mystical Dispute, and you can see that Mengu's mana, and Rei sort of just a shake of the head. That's like, yep, all right, okay, I see how it is. I see how it is, Mr. Mengucci.
And that's been how it's been since the start of the match for Rei, right? We saw
it really has been, man.
Rei just did not have the mana available. Oxyvagonus too little too late here, in my
Too little
opinion.
too
Just
late. Yep.
you're going to tap out, draw 3 cards. Andrea's going to dance to the man, so you don't answer this board.
The other thing here is this Dance of the Manse only gets better thanks to the Doom Foretold, because you can now sacrifice one of the Omens and bring one of them back as well. So
Yeah.
Mengu in prime position here. In
I
prime
like the
position.
Omen of the Sun. I think Andrea's going to think about it a little bit. You have 2 bindings already in the graveyard. You don't need to get another one back. I think maybe you want the card here. I like the life, honestly.
Think of all the forests you could fetch up if you brought back all the bindings.
I also think it's reasonable for Andrea to just cast a Mirius Call here instead. Once again, it will allow him to play around Mystical Disputes.
Mm-hmm.
We do know that post-board Rei does have access to 2 of those, but he's already seen 1, so he could go for the more game-winning play, but it really doesn't matter. Just get rid of that Innkeeper. No cards. No way for Rei to get back. Continue shutting this down.
So Eliminate removes the Innkeeper. This Ox is here. It's going to get sacrificed to the Doom Foretold, of course. Now, Rei can bring it back.
Rei can bring it back.
And may do exactly that, find a new hand. But it doesn't do a lot.
It doesn't do a lot. But this is Rei finding small windows to try to find a counterspell, right?
Yep.
At some point, Andrea's going to find a backup counterspell, and he's going to feel confident casting this Dance of the Manse. If this Dance of the Manse resolves at any point, Andrea will win the game. So it's really a matter of Rei needs to make sure he's not tapping out, and Andrea doesn't find a card that will allow him to feel safe playing this Dance of the Manse.
So here's the Ox coming back from beyond the grave. Woo! And 3 new cards. Okay, Brazen Borrow's not a bad one. Another Lovestruck Beast. See one in the Adventure Zone already. But Mengu's just sitting pretty on this Dance of the Manse, and like, there's so much stuff that this can bring back now. 3 copies of Binding, Omen. There's also still that Doom Foretold. This is Mengu's game to lose, man.
It definitely is. And the big thing for Mengu right now is he's got a clock, which means Rei may actually feel pressure into using this petty theft on one of these angels during combat.
Yeah,
if he does so, shields are down. And that means Andrea's going to cast Dance. And when he does that, the game's over.
Yes, indeed. So let's see if the Italian Stallion hits the dance floor here. Doom Foretold. Mengu might be in the process of clipping this play in order to send it into MTG Top 5. He's taking his time with it here.
Andrea is 1 mana short of being able to dance for 6 and pay for a Mystical Dispute. That's an untapped land, so Andrea, looking at Rei's list, should know that there's no 2 mana counterspells if there's no card Foretold. There's nothing like a Disdainful Stroke or a Negate.
Or a negate or something,
this Dance for 6 is just going to resolve no matter what. Rei only has 1 blue mana up, and he's already used 1 Mystical Dispute. And yeah, you see Andrea wasting no time, immediately plays that Fabled Passage. So much discipline from Andrea this match, and it's just paying off. This has just been incredible to watch.
And you can see that Rei knew exactly what was going on. He was shuffling through Mengu's graveyard, looking at what was about to come back. And look at this: triple Binding, double Omen, 3, 4. As if Binding of the Old Gods weren't already enough of a beating, it's now an actual literal beating with 12 power of awakened sagas entering the battlefield, in addition to 2 Omens here. Mengu has put on an absolute clinic in this match. He has done an incredible job of showing just how strong this deck can be. He is a petty theft on the Angel. Rather in effect, you would have thought, and it looks like Rei is ready to pack him up here, offering the GG pretty soon, I would have thought, because there's no way that he can beat this board. He was
hovering it, says, I'm going to look at what I draw here. I have Ox of Agonis. I can get 3 more cards. In reality, Rei knows they don't exist. You can't cast. Maybe you could draw land, Alrund's Epiphany, cast it, and hope it resolves. But yeah, Rei is not one to stay in it longer than he should. And Mengu, convincing victory here in this match.
Very, very convincing victory for the Italian here. He's done very well.